Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are here with another video. This time we're not playing Pauper Leagues, but we are discussing Modern Horizons 3. So I'm going to shout out basically some cards that I do think you need to keep your eye on, but also some cards which are in my order. I've got some honourable mentions and then a top 5, and that is going to be my cards that are going to see play for me. So first of all, I would like to make a disclaimer though. The first card that I'm going to mention, which is Cranial Ram, and that card should definitely be on everybody's radar if you're in the Pauper scene. This card's been discussed by the PFP about being pre-banned. I am not including this in my top 5 because it's basically too free. Like, obviously, in terms of a ranking, a card that's got pre-banned surely must be number 1. So with that being said, Cranial Ram is definitely not up there for my top 5 or honourable mention. It is just there. That's going to exist. It'll be allowed to exist for either a week or they'll pre-ban it. So it's that simple. Cranial Ram is not there. So with that being said, I have 6 honourable mentions. My first one, they're in no particular order. I'm just going in colour order, really, I think. So my first one is Jolted Awake. And for those that don't know what this is, it is a 1 mana sorcery that you can choose up to 1 target artifact or creature in your graveyard. You get 2 energy, and then you may spend any amount of energy equal to that card's mana value. If you do, return it to the graveyard to the battlefield and cycle. So this is sort of like a weird recommission unearth sort of card. So it's 1 mana and has cycling, so you obviously and returns a creature. But if you play just this card, you basically only get to return a 2-drop because you've only got 2 energy. But being 1 mana makes so first of all, recommission doesn't see that much play. It sees a little bit of play in mono white and then occasional play like here and there, like it used to play like a 1-of or something in Boros Synth a long time ago. But being 2 mana is really awkward, first of all. So there is that. And then secondly, this being 1 mana and also cycles gives me more hope that this card is probably going to see play. It'll most likely replace, I think it'll most likely replace Recommission in the White Weenie decks. Because you don't get Bugler and you don't get, there's another 3-drop that's escaped my mind from White Weenie, but you do get the rest at a cheaper rate, which means you can keep the pressure on a bit. And also, if you end up running more than one, if the first one gets a 1-drop, the second one can get a 3-drop. So there is worlds where basically this is actually just reasonable. And then, as I say, the cycling just helps it to me. So that is the first card that I think is definitely worthwhile keeping an eye on and probably will see play. The next card here is Basking Brood Scale, another card that you most likely will have heard. This card has gone crazy. This card was going to be the card the PFP were talking about, because if you didn't know, this card combos with a card called, I believe it's Sadistic Glee, which is it's a 1 black enchantment that whenever a creature dies, you put a counter on enchanted creature. So for 3 mana, effectively, you can play this, play the Sadistically, either have a creature die or pay 2 to adapt it, and then get your 1/1, and then the 1/1 sacks. And then you've sacked it to add a mana, you get a counter, and then it makes another 1/1, and you can rinse and repeat that. So you get infinite colorless mana, but you also get an infinite powered guy. So personally, this combo is going to be tested. People are going to try it. It's a 3 mana combo. It's Splinter Twin, as people will call it. I do think this is going to be a meme. I really do, because especially the problem is having a wink on. So you have an infinite powered guy, which is fine, but that means you need the turn to untap. Unless you're using Rites of Consumption, then it's not a 2-card combo, or if you're using fling effects. So it basically just gets the build around, gets to be awkward. And it's got no built-in protection or anything like that. So overall, I do think this deck is going to end up being a meme deck. it could surprise me. Obviously, there will be eyes on this, and there will be people testing it and trying out different shells. So it might get there. But then again, I also do think it is probably good enough to play in like Mono Green Stompy. So it's another tool for Mono Green Stompy. They run Howl, which gets you 3 counters, which gets you a spawn. There's different kind, like your protection could be different to make sure like this gets counters and things like that. I do think it is probably playable in Stompy. The next card is Evolution Witness, and that is a 2 and a green 2/1 with 1 and a green adapt 2 that says whenever one or more counters is put on Evolution Witness, return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. So this card is basically Eternal Witness, but with adapt and some countery shenanigans. It seems fine. It seems like a solid card. I don't think it'll see any play as a fair card. Like, no one's paying 5 mana for a 4/3 that brings a guy back. So I think this will only see play if people do break it. So it does combo with quite a few cards. So it's like a 3-card combo or a 4-card combo. I can't remember what it is, but you basically use this. A bunch of the 1 mana 1/1 artifacts, like I think it's Iron Apprentice or something, that whenever it dies, it puts a counter on something. So you can sacrifice it. You sacrifice the Iron Apprentice to something like Ashnod's Altar, add 2 colorless, put a counter on this guy, return the Iron Apprentice back, play it, sack it again, and you float 1 colorless mana through that whole entire cycle. Again, a 3-card combo, but you're not having a win con. You get an infinite powered guy, but that is it. I do think, again, another thing that it will end up being like a meme deck, and definitely people will try it, and I will try it, most likely, and it'll probably be bad. But these are the cards to keep an eye on, because obviously they do combo, they do create combos, just like the Scrounger and the Skybreaker, the backup combo. Again, just another 2-card combo, just another meme, and yeah. Especially creature 2-card combos are pretty fragile. The removal in Pauper is pretty good. So that is why I think this is probably not going to see much play, but it is an honourable mention that it does now exist. Then there is, moving on to the next honourable mention, is Cyclops Superconductor, which, for those that don't know, is a 1 blue and a red 2/2 with prowess. When this Superconductor enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy. When it dies, you may pay 3 energy. If you do, Cyclops Superconductor deals damage equal to its power to any target. So my first thought with this is it Blitz or Blue-Red Kiln Fiend? This is a Nivix Cyclops. Obviously, it's a worse initial body, but it will always shock something when it dies if you're not running any other energy cards. It's just generally a better card with prowess. So obviously it doesn't go bigger. It doesn't go bigger than Nivix Cyclops, but it does things more stable. And then say if you play this, you play a bunch of stuff on it and then go to team a battle rage it. If they then kill it when you team a battle rage it, you still deal a bunch of damage regardless. It might not obviously have double strike or whatever, but it still deals a lot of damage. So that's where I think that this card will probably shine in that deck. But I don't know if that'll make that deck that much better that it's going to now absolutely break the meta game for sure. So yeah, I do think this card's worth keeping an eye on. Solid card. Solid card for that deck anyways. And yeah, sweet one. My next to last card is one that's probably you've been heard about as well, which is Sneaky Snacker. This is a blue-black 2/1 with flying. It is a fairy rogue, and whenever you draw your 3rd card in a turn, return this to the battlefield tapped. So the reason why I think this card's good is, well, it's sort of, there's 2 ways to look at this. This is a fairy that you can play in like blue-black fair, that whenever you cast Brainstorm and it's died, you get to bring it back. So it's like a recursive threat that also includes your fairy count, which is something. And I don't know. I think that's probably the flaw with this card. I think the ceiling of it is probably a lot higher in the sense that this is probably as close to a Pauper narc amoeba in inverted commas that you're probably getting, or a prized amalgam is probably the closest place. And it won't be instant, I don't think. I don't think this card same play will be instant. I think it'll just, in the next 3 to 6 months, someone will discover some strange interaction with Brainstorm and some sort of deck, and it'll basically make this possible to be able to return a bunch of stuff. I don't know, Dread Return, whatever. I have no idea. My brain is too small to work out this card, but I do feel like this card is so unique in its effect that I do think it will see play. Like, obviously, if you draw a card for your turn and then Deadly Dispute and Ica Wellspring, or even just Deadly Dispute an artifact or a creature, I think you can actually Deadly Dispute this. If you have this in play, then Deadly Dispute this in your turn. You've sacked it as an additional cost, drew your card for your turn, then draw 2 cards. So that's your 3rd card, so you can return it back. So, like, even little interactions like this, that I do think this might make a deck somewhere down the line, and it'll be the engine that sort of glues it all together. And then my final honourable mention, I don't know if this card is actually going to be good. It has some interactions, but it is my favourite card of the set, and is the favourite card that I'm looking forward to playing. And that is basically just from a Goblins combo Mogwarts player. And that is Siege Smash, which is 1 and a red for an instant, with Split Second. Choose one, destroy target artifact, or target creature gets +3/+2 and gains trample. I do think this card's probably got play elsewhere, like it's probably okay in Kiln Fiend, or probably okay in something along them lines. Split Second's a solid ability, and the buff sort of helps that. After that, the only way I see this scene play is obviously destroys an artifact at split second speed, which means you can destroy a relic, a blood fountain, a Mer Enforcer, a Nile Spellbomb, all of these sort of cards without them being able to interact. So it does sort of come up where, like, you can kill a Mer Enforcer against Grixis Affinity whilst they can't Deadly Dispute or Reckoner's Bargain it. You can kill a relic before they pop it. You can kill a blood fountain before they can pop it. But the thing that I do like with this card is it destroys an artifact, so you can kill something. If you have your Goblin combo in play, your Putrid Goblin and your Skirk Prospector, and you cast First Air Class, you can then cast this and then get infinite mana without being disrupted. And that is because Skirk Prospector is classed as a mana ability. So you can't do anything bar make mana abilities or activate abilities that are mana abilities. That causes the other 2 cards to trigger, but that doesn't matter. So you can basically get infinite red without them responding. And the only way this obviously you do have to have the combo, like you have to cast them all. But in some matchups with Goblin combo or Mogwarts, so I describe it, the way they interact is with the Putrid Goblin with the -1/-1 counter on it, responding to the First Aid class trigger. And that is quite a common interaction point for a lot of players and a lot of decks. So either they have to change how they interact with it to deal with this card, or they have to change their type of interaction. And that's actually quite a good thing for Goblin combo players, because that is obviously the weak point, which is why a lot of players do it. And if they have to change their interaction to kill the Skirk Prospector before you cast the First Aid class or something along them lines, that is a lot better for Goblin combo players, because they are a lot easier to deal with. You can manage those sort of pieces because you have a lot more points of interaction or points of ways to get around these sorts of interaction. So yeah, that's why I like this card, and I could probably ramble on about this card all day long. Anyways, so that is that, and that is my honourable mention. So I'm moving on to the top 5 cards. In at number 5 is Fangled Flames. So this is a 1 and a red sorcery with Devoid. Fangled Flame deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker would die this turn, exile it instead. So I think this card will see play. I think it's probably going to see more than sideboard play as well. This card has Devoid, even though it is red, so it has no colours. So my first point is the reason that the flaw with this card is the fact that it can kill a Guardian of Guild Pact very easily. My second thing is it's 1 mana less than Ghostfire, and it does 1 more damage than Ghostfire. It is a sorcery, but I don't think that matters. It can kill a Mer Enforcer and exile it. It can kill. Basically, after that point, it can kill pretty much anything. It can kill an Overgrown Battlements and exile it. And the fact that it exiles is also fairly important. Mer Enforcer can't come back with Blood Fountain. Overgrown Battlements and stuff like that can't come back with Reaper of the Graves. And there is just other decks you can just hit something with. And like even if you have to go bolt this, it literally can't come back, and that is a strong point to have. Like it kills an Avenging Hunter as well, which then can't be returned by Blood Fountain if they're playing against Gardens. So I do think this card is good, and I probably wouldn't be surprised if it's seen play in like Blue Red Fair, Blue Red Scred, or any other red deck, to be honest. I wouldn't be surprised if it was probably splashed in like Corgate. Most likely sideboard, I would imagine, but I would not be surprised if this card's seen play. Card seems very solid. So that is my number 5. Moving on to number 4. Number 4 is the Landscape Lands. That is, I can't remember the name of them all. I have Seething Landscape up here, which what they do is there's 10 of them. They tap to add 1 colourless. And they sacrifice. You can then tap them to sacrifice them. Search for a color trio. So Grixis either blue, black, red, or Jeskai, which is white, red, blue. And then they cycle through every single one. And they also have cycling as well for that 3 mana color. So what that allows them to do is you can play it earlier on, and then if you then need the color, or if you need it for the shuffle effect, like Brainstorm, things like that. I think these cards are just great, to be honest. So being able to have these in play and then also then get the colours later on really is important, I think, for a lot of decks. So for me, my first thought is any blue-based deck, any blue of them, like blue-based decks, like blue-white familiars or even Corgi. I can't remember what even runs Ash Barons at this point. Any blue-based deck that runs Ash Barons, even Fairies, or even the new Capenna lands like Maestro's Theatre and stuff like that. I instantly think these cards will replace them, because unless they have really high color requirements, the fact that this can just sit in play and tap for colorless is really good. So, and then if you ever have that mana, just end the turn, I'll sack it, I'll get my land, and it'll come in tapped, and I'll untap with it. So this basically allows that, and then later on in the game, if you're flooded and you draw it, just cycle it. So where those decks sort of, it will happen. Some of them, like say the blue-black decks, for example, or the blue-white decks, they might struggle to obviously cycle the 3 colored requirements. But I also think something like there's potential for maybe even Gardens to run this, like run the Jund one, because they've been running red splashes of late. So what's to say that they can't run a forest and a mountain? But they don't have high color requirements. So apart from Crypt Rats, which obviously you need a lot of black for, they're very much like 1 and a black, or 4 and a green. So they're not very like black heavy or green heavy. So you can easily just have this land in play, tapping it for a colorless. And then in the late game, because you've got the treasure and also the 3 color requirements, you can cycle this later on in the game. I do think a lot of decks will utilize these. Even the black-white decks, like black-white Titan Blade, uses the new Capenna lands ones that gets. I think it's the Esper one. They use Obscura Storefront. You can now use these. So I do think these are a much bigger upgrade for the most part to the new Capenna lands and Ash Barons. So these will likely start to see play. And that is why they are my number 3. No, number 4 even. Moving on to number 3 is Eviscerator's Insight. This card is an effect that they've done a lot. For those who don't know what this is 1 and a black instant. As an additional cost, you may sacrifice an artifact or creature. Like we haven't heard that text before. And it is draw 2 cards and then flashback for 4 and a black. So from recent times, they've obviously recently printed. We went from a time from having Costly Plunder and them sort of never really revisiting that. And then all of a sudden Deadly Dispute came out. And then since then, it's just this effect has been non-stop. So you've got Deadly Dispute, you've got Reckoner's Bargain, you've got Fanatical Offering, and now you have this. And the thing that I like about this card is having flashback. So this is basically a Costly Plunder, but with flashback. Not getting a treasure, not getting a life, not getting a map tool or anything like that is fine. I do think something like Gardens and potentially even other decks that can utilize this sort of effect will now start to, because the flashback is really big. If you have mana, if you're in the control mirrors, whatever, this card will shine. And I can definitely see this seeing play and replacing some Fanatical Offerings. Obviously, the downside is that they don't feed themselves. So the big thing about Deadly Dispute and Fanatical Offering as a collective is they feed themselves. They make an artifact for you to sacrifice for the next one. And that's why Gardens can maximize on these and then minimize on artifacts and creatures. So usually, Calmly Garden and then a Swamp will basically be a cast your Deadly Dispute, which will sack the plant. You'll get a treasure. You'll hold on to the treasure. You'll Fanatical Offering the treasure. You'll Deadly Dispute that treasure, that map, and then rinse and repeat all the way through. Ta-da! You've drawn through your whole deck from 1 Calendar Garden and 1 of your draw 2s. This is not the case, so this will not be. I will think this will not be a 4 of. I could see this being played in Gardens and in other Deadly Dispute decks as a way to just have that extended thing, because there is times where you end up with an abundance of Ica Wellsprings, or you end up with an abundance of Lembuses or whatever, and this is where this will shine, I think. Mainly in Gardens, but in other decks too. I could see this seeing play in Mogwarts, for example, potentially replacing maybe 1 or 2, or replace the Fanatical Offerings, like potentially having Deadly Dispute, 2 Fanatical Offerings, and then maybe 2 of these, and replacing a Faithless Looting in the common lists. Who knows? I think this card's very strong. And that leads me to my number 2, and that is Thraben Charm. This card is very interesting. It is 1 and a white for an instant. It deals damage equal to twice the number of creatures you control to target creature. It destroys target enchantment, and it exiles any number of target players' graveyards. So this is instant speed graveyard removal in a spell. I don't think this sort of effect, like exiling a graveyard at instant speed on a spell, is actually a thing until now. Like, you've got like Crypt Incursion, but also you don't have it in white, I'm certain. So, and also with 2 other relevant abilities is the main thing also. Like, dealing twice the number of damage to creatures isn't that bad. Like, no one really likes these Hobbit Sting sort of effects, but they're not that bad. Especially when they have 2 relevant abilities. Destroying a makeshift munitions obviously doesn't destroy glitters anymore, because that card is gone, rip glitters. But it does destroy relevant things like destroying enchantments. It hits relevant creatures, and most white decks are running some amount of creatures. Even Familiars gets flooded on the board, has 3 creatures, a Familiar, a Godfarer's Faithful. This deals 4. Like, with 2 creatures on this kills a Mer Enforcer. So I do think that is a good thing about the card, and I do think exiling a player's graveyard at instant speed is also very good. I think this card will most likely replace Destroy Evil in most decks. And then in some instances, depending on the meta, it could replace Journey to Nowhere in some decks too. So Core Gate's an interesting one, because it's probably the first Journey deck that comes to mind. But it also is a weird one where it doesn't run that many creatures to then have the deal damage be that relevant. But then exiling a player's graveyard and hitting something like makeshift munitions when the deck struggles against that is pretty important. But other than that, I think like stuff like White Weenie, which runs like 4 journeys, this card's probably better. You're flooding the board, you're probably dealing 10. You also have the ability to get rid of their graveyard at instant speed. 4 Dredge, which is a common deck, also really good at hitting the graveyard for like familiars. Any other thing with Archaeomancer or some sort of ephemerate loops. But those sort of decks as well, the Archaeomancer, Blue Eye Familiars, Jeskai Ephemerate, these will benefit from this card because they can Archaeomancer Ephemerate this back to their hand constantly and make sure that their Dredge player, even the mirrors, won't have access to their graveyard. This card is probably going to impact the format more than we probably expect, especially now that Glitters is gone and it is a much more control and metagame. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing this card became commonplace in a lot of main decks and a lot more sideboards. And that is why this card is my number 2. Yeah. My number 1 card may not surprise people. It has been shown on a lot of people's either top 10 or even on Twitter, a lot of people's discussion points. My number 1 card for this set, obviously not including Cranial Ram, is Refurbished Familiar. And that is a 3 and a black artifact creature zombie rat. Affinity for artifacts. It has flying. And when it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. So this is basically, if you are playing this in an artifact-based shell, this is 1 black for a 2/1 that the opponent discards a card. If you've done this enough times or they've run out of cards, you draw a card. So it's not like Burglar Rats where you burglar at them to death and then that's it, your cards are dead. This basically replaced itself if that's the case. I'm really excited to use this card in multiple different ways. I think probably stuff like Grixis Affinity will adopt this. It's great with Blood Fountain, great getting it down early. It's great in black-white decks, like Glinthawk, Core Skyfisher decks, where you can bounce it and play it again to just keep ripping the hand apart. I have no other options other than those decks right now, but being even in it's a zombie, you could potentially play this in like some sort of zombie archetype with artifacts. It literally being 1 black 2/1 flyer is also a good rate to start with, but then also not only having the Burglar Rat clause and making you draw a card if they've got no hand is pretty good. Like the rate on this card is incredible. And I think people are going to be sick of this card very, very quickly. So how I imagine this will go and Cranial Ram ends up getting pre-banned, and that is obviously the PFP's decision, not saying I agree or disagree with any of that, but that's the way I think is going to happen looking at the responses by the community. That gets pre-banned, this card comes out, and then I imagine stuff like Black White Blade, Mardu, Wildfire or Mardu Synth, Grixis Affinity all adopt this card, and everyone's sick of having their hand ripped apart. Is probably how I imagine this going. But yeah, this is my number 1 card. I do think this card is really strong. It looks very innocuous, but it is definitely a powerhouse. Anything with affinity for artifacts is obviously going to be strong, and this card is definitely that. So that is my top 5, along with about 6 honourable mentions. Obviously, this is my number 1 card for the set, so definitely do think about picking this up. And I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and please do not forget to like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And I will see you guys in the MH3 Battlegrounds.